Welcome to our second live session. I hope everybody's doing well, and I hope you're enjoying the course so far. Today, one of my TAs, Farzana Hedayati, and I are going to answer your questions, and I thought we'd each give our answers to some of the questions that you've asked. And I'm going to start with a question from a student who identifies him or herself as D18. And first I'll read the question. D18 says, "We live in the context of global stratification. A major concern when discussing global inequality is how to avoid an ethnocentric bias by implying that less developed nations want to be like those who've already gained post-industrial power." But also in the text reading for this week is this. This is a quote: "Consider the controversy surrounding female genital mutilation. Nations that practice this procedure defend it as a long-standing cultural tradition in certain tribes and argue that the West shouldn't interfere. Western nations on the opposite side say the practice is horrible and they should stop doing it." So D18 asks, doesn't the West have an ethnocentric bias here, and shouldn't they just be leaving female circumcision to the countries that decide to practice it, because for their culture it's the norm? Well, D18, both Farzani and I are going to give our answers to your question. Let me start by saying I see what you're saying. And in fact, I saw a documentary a few years ago where it was about a British woman who went and lived with a tribe of villagers in Africa for several weeks. And the whole time she was there, her experience was filmed. And she became friends with all of the villagers, male and female. And they discussed many personal issues with her, including the women discussed the practice in their village of female circumcision, which was normative for them. And what they reported was that they felt like it was no big deal. It was an important practice and a valuable practice, these women felt. So after I saw that, I thought, okay, well, one could argue that our Western abhorrence of the practice is simply a function of our own socialization, each of us grows up and we get our parents or whomever teaches us a certain value system and we assimilate that. And so from our perspective, the practice looks barbaric, but it's because of a function of the way we were raised. And I thought, well, maybe if I was raised in that village in Africa, I would feel like it was no big deal and it was just normal. Okay. There are, in fact, social scientists who have suggested that female genital mutilation belongs in the same category, or in other words, that it's no worse than some of the things our cultural mandates push women to do, such as be always on a diet and get plastic cosmetic surgery so that we can all look like the American ideal of female beauty. And those social scientists and philosophers said, isn't FGM just another example of the same thing, where whatever culture you're in, there are that women and men are supposed to follow in order to be seen as, normal members of their culture or desirable members of their culture. I don't feel that way, but I guess where I come down on this issue is guided by a point made by a philosopher, a woman named Martha Nussbaum. She's a PhD, and Dr. Nussbaum noted that most female genital mutilation is done on girls when they are young children, and it's done by force. They are held down forcibly and cut, all right? The statistics indicate, the research indicates that most of the women who are cut in between the age of either shortly after birth, anywhere up to the age of 15. However, the majority of those girls are cut under the age of 5. So to me, that's the difference, that these girls are not allowed to make the decision for themselves, and they are held down forcibly and cut. So to me, the practice is barbaric. Those girls did not have a choice. But now I want to turn it over to Farzan and let her, tell us what she thinks about the practice. Okay, Farzan, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Farzan, one of your TAs for this course, and I'm very glad that today we have this opportunity to talk to you and answer your questions. So, my idea about the first question is that the first time that I heard about FGM was 6 years ago when I was in my hometown, Iran. And I remember because FGM is a popular surgery in some cities of my country. We had a seminar in our university, and there were many different scholars, sociologists, psychologists, and specialists in human rights gathered there to discuss about FGM as an issue and how we could stop it in our country. I said that to let you know that this is not just a Western problem, and it is also an Eastern problem. And even in Eastern countries, the majority, especially in my country, don't accept this kind of acts. And the reason I should explain for you the reason that why they don't consider this surgery an act, an acceptable act. Based on WHO, the World Health Organization, this surgery causes disability. There are different types of FGM, from cutting the skin to removing the whole organ, and all of them are considered as a type of disability, and this is not acceptable. And on the other hand, this kind of surgery causes a lot of different problems for women. Research shows this, that it could cause depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-trauma stress disorder, and different types of infections. And in some cases, infertility among women. And I think this is the reality of FGM, and it is very important to stop it, whether you are an Eastern or Western activist. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to a question from Rosa Anna. Okay. Rosa Anna asks, and this is her question. All right. I find that a meritocratic society is ableist, sexist, and ageist. All right. So she asks, how can the disabled or pregnant or maybe lactating women, and how can the old fit into this model of the meritocratic society? Well, I would say, first of all, Rosa Anna, let's look at what this week's reading says about meritocracies. I'm just going to read this. This is a quote from the reading. It says, meritocracy is an ideal system based on the belief that social stratification is the result of personal effort or personal merit that determines social standing. So according to this ideal of the meritocratic society, high levels of effort will lead to a high social position, and vice versa. If you don't make an effort, you won't attain success in the society. So the concept of a meritocratic society is actually, it's an ideal, because there hasn't ever been a society in existence where social rank was based purely on merit, okay? So one of the things that the authors of the reading are saying here is that the concept of the meritocratic society is what we call in sociology an ideal type. In other words, it's a prototype. It doesn't exist in reality. So let me say further that the meritocratic society is kind of a functionalist idea from the functionalist perspective in sociology. It's the cream always rises to the top argument. It's the American dream argument that anybody who works hard and saves their money and plays by the rules of the society is going to succeed in life. However, we already know just by looking at our society that that's a myth. That isn't reality. Lots of people in our society work ridiculously hard and save money as best they can and play by all of society's rules, and they are never able to upgrade their socioeconomic status. Because let's face it, the cards are stacked against some people due to prejudice, due to discrimination, due to the existence of some laws and practices that favor the rich and powerful. All right. I mean, just look at who Trump has picked for his cabinet and his close advisors. He's picked a bunch of white male billionaires, right? All of whom are about to get a big fat tax break courtesy of Mr. Trump. So despite what he says publicly, it's clear that Trump cares only about taking care of people in the same income bracket as himself. So Rosa Ana, you're right. People with disabilities, seniors, and other groups are at a disadvantage in our current system. They are not on a level playing field. We do not have a level playing field here in the United States. And to my mind, this is why we must talk together, organize, be politically active, and do what we can to preserve the rights that exist for people and to advance equal rights and opportunities for those whom the ruling class would just as soon ignore. All right. I'm going to turn this over to you now, Farzan, so you can say what you think.
Okay, thank you. And I think your answer was very good. And the only thing that I want to add is that I know as a foreigner in this country, I know that the US has its own problems. But I should mention that when I compare the situation of disabled people, women, and elderly in a country, in a developed country like US, with my own country, it really shocks me. And let me give you an example. There is not a week that I walk in campus and I don't see a disabled student on their wheelchair going to class, and that's something that you almost never see in my country. I don't say this is enough, and I don't say that the United States or Western world doesn't have its own problems. The only thing is, at least you can see there are people who are trying to include these minorities, and this is very important that at this certain time, people shouldn't take this for granted and should know what they already have, which is not perfect, but is better than many other countries. They shouldn't even take this for granted, and they should try to develop it as much as they can.
Okay, thanks, Farzan. So I guess we'll move on to another question now from another student who asks, and this is his or her question: in what ways are stereotyping and discrimination against certain groups a means to maintain social stratification where the wealthy get to maintain their social status? All right, well, my response, and then you'll get Farzan's thoughts on this too. My thoughts are that stereotyping and discrimination are two of the practices that the elites of society have been using for centuries to keep themselves at the top of the hierarchy. Because the elites have so much money and influence, they've been able to get their stereotypes and their beliefs disseminated, sent down through the mass media, so that those ideas now permeate our culture at all levels of society. I think a lot of times citizens have to be educated in order to see beyond the stereotypes and the beliefs that they grew up with. Because without that education, people, they see what the ideas that they were raised with, they take those for granted, and they aren't able to see that there's another way of looking at things. They aren't able to see that the ideas they have were simply put on them through the socialization process. Just to take one example here, Donald Trump is claiming that he's claimed throughout his campaign and so on, immigrants are coming into the US and they're stealing our jobs. Well, that's just a lie. I mean, but a lot of people believe it, okay? Immigrants that come into this country, from what I've read, they're either doing the jobs that Americans don't want to do anyway, or they're doing jobs that many Americans really aren't trained to do anyway. They don't have the skills or the training to do. And, you know, if they're here working legally, if they've got green cards and so on, then they're paying taxes and paying into the Social Security system, just like the rest of us. To get more specific, let's take manufacturing jobs in the US, for example. All right. As we know, a lot of manufacturing jobs have been lost over the last few decades. The reality is they weren't lost because immigrants took them. The biggest chunk of the manufacturing job loss is a function of automation. People aren't doing those jobs anymore because now those jobs are being done by robots and computers. All right. And guess what? Those jobs are not coming back to human beings. All right. Companies who have started, you know, using the automated systems, the robots and the computers, they can operate a lot more cheaply now because they don't have to pay humans to do those jobs that the robots and the computers are now doing. All right. And they are not going to go back to having to pay humans to do those jobs. The second largest chunk of manufacturing job loss is due to outsourcing, okay? Trump says, our new president says he's going to bring those jobs back into the US. Well, I guess we'll see if he makes, for example, his own daughter Ivanka's company move its clothing and accessories manufacturing plants out of Vietnam, out of China, right, and out of Indonesia and back into the US. And we'll see if he will make her bring those jobs back into the US and then hire American workers who won't work as cheaply as they do in China and Indonesia and so on. And then Donald Trump, as many of you may know, has had his own clothing line, and that line was manufactured by sweatshop workers in Shenzhen, China. He paid those Chinese workers horribly low wages. He made them live in cramped living quarters. He routinely had them, the employers, search the belongings of those employees, and he denied them basic work benefits. They didn't get sick benefits, they didn't get any vacation time, and so on. So maybe he'll start with his own family in bringing those jobs back to the US. Let's hope he does. All right. But returning to what's going on here in the US for a moment, there's a great sociologist named Herbert Gans who noted that those at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, who, as we know, are all too often stereotyped in a negative way and discriminated against, the sociologist says that those people are deliberately kept down on the lower rungs of the social ladder by the elites of society, because it serves the interests of those elites to keep those people down. For example, and so this is kind of a functionalist argument. How is it functional for the elites what purpose does it serve for the elites to keep the people and the lower classes down there on the lower rungs of the social ladder? Well, here's what he noticed. Lower class people, they provide a low wage labor pool to do society's dirty jobs. They subsidize a variety of activities for the affluent. For example, they serve as guinea pigs in medical research. They provide domestic workers such as gardeners, housekeepers, and servants. They provide those services to the ruling class. Okay, they also create jobs in certain occupations that either serve the poor, for example, pawn shop owners, or protect the rest of society from those folks, for example, prison guards. All right. He notes that the poor also subsidize merchants by buying products that other people don't want. For example, dilapidated housing, produce at a grocery store that is past its prime. Right? The poor also serve as a group to be punished in order to reinforce conventional values. We see a lot of that going on right now with Trump's Muslim ban, travel ban, right? They also serve as guarantors of the statuses of those who are higher up on the social ladder. And they typically are, when it comes to the world of work, they are the sacrificial lambs for the sake of the national economy. They'll be the last to be hired, and they'll be the first to be fired or laid off. The sociologist Herbert Gans goes on to note that many of these purposes that are currently served by the lower classes could be served by other means other than keeping those people poor. For example, paying decent wages to those who do the dirty jobs would help raise them out of poverty. However, to raise their wages, that would mean that the people who employ low-wage workers who buy the products they make or the services they provide would have to shell out more money. And of course, those employers don't want to do that. So poverty, according to Gans, is not going to be eliminated unless and until keeping those poor people poor ceases to serve the interests of the elites of the society, okay? Or maybe until the lower classes, the working classes of society get together as an interest group, right? And become politically active and are able to acquire enough voting power to change the status quo. Farzana, what do you think about this? I'm going to put it to you.
So I would like to take a look at this question from a psychological point of view, and I'm going to say that one of the most important needs of human being is self-esteem, and it is very important that how someone wants to answer this need. And self-esteem is different from self-confidence. You might be able to become confident about yourself by having a big house or having a big company or having more money, but you won't feel self-esteem unless you have respect for yourself. And self-esteem is more about dignity and your faith in your own humanity. So we see that sometimes people spend most of their life, and we see that sometimes among elite society, that they spend most of their life trying to enhance their self-confidence while forgetting about their self-esteem. So what happens then, and why I told all of this? Because when there is a lack of self-esteem, people try to trash other people and develop stereotypes against them to feel good about themselves. And a good example is that we see today is that even when you become a president of a big country and you don't have self-esteem, and the only things that you have are related to your self-confidence, you can't avoid dividing people into us and them. You can't avoid developing stereotypes against them, because a very important human need in you is not answered, which is self-esteem. And I think this could be one of the reasons that why elites try to trash other groups of people sometimes.
Okay, thanks, Farzan. That was great. And while Farzan and I are talking about these questions and giving our own viewpoints on them, I hope it will stimulate you to think about these issues yourself and how you feel about them, because it's not important that you agree or disagree with us. It's what we hope we are doing in this course is stimulating you, motivating you to nail down what you think about these issues so that you can become more engaged with what's going on in your own society, in your own country. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question now from another student. This is from Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa. All right. And first I'll read Vanessa's question. Okay. Vanessa asks, are NGOs, and that NGO stands for non-governmental organization, okay? Are NGOs like UNICEF, World Vision, or War Child supporting the global stratification, the socioeconomic stratification of people all around the world? Or are they truly assisting people in peripheral nations, okay? Vanessa, I can only offer my own opinion on this. I believe that non-governmental organizations are truly trying to raise up and empower the citizens of those countries. I don't view the work of those organizations or their efforts as condescending, or I don't think that they're trying to say, I don't think that the people who run the NGOs are trying to say that they are somehow better than the people they are helping. I don't think they are trying to impose their own values and beliefs on the people that they are helping. Of course, Farzan, you may have a different view, and I'm going to turn it over to you now so you can say what you think about this.
Yeah, I just want to tell my experience with UNICEF that it is very interesting to me that even in Iran, there are different branches of UNICEF, and I want to assure you that if UNICEF wanted to impose their own values on people, they could never be able to work in a dictatorship like Iran, because Iranian government never let organizations do anything against them, or that shows me that they entirely and purely care only about children and their mothers, and yeah, that's my experience with UNICEF at least.
Okay, thanks, Farzan. I think we've covered the questions that we were going to answer today, but I want to talk a little bit about you, the students. I've been so impressed with your work so far in the course. I've been impressed in particular by the quality of your Yellow Dig posts and the content of what you've been saying. And what's really remarkable to me is we have students from all over the world. I think I told you last time 135 different countries, and we have students as young as 10 years old and then up to like 100 or so years old. And it is such a pleasure to me to read posts from this wide gamut of students and wide gamut of backgrounds and ages and experience. And I find your posts to be very insightful and very well written. And it's great for us who are the course staff. It's great for us to get your perspectives from those of you who live elsewhere in the world, who come from a different background. And so I feel like you are educating us as much as, you know, I feel like the learning is going in both directions. I would like to encourage those of you who maybe haven't posted that much in Yellow Dig on haven't given your input on maybe the question or the prompt that we've given students each week, please don't be shy. Please don't be afraid to share your views with us, because it helps all of us to be more well-rounded and more sophisticated in our outlook if we have the benefit of all manner of viewpoints on different social and global issues. Farzan, I'd like you to maybe say a little bit about your thoughts on that, on your reading of Yellow Dig posts for the first few weeks here.
Yes, Lisa, that was really interesting to me that we have many different students with many different backgrounds, and I was every time that I sign into Yellow Dig, I'm excited to see these different posts from all around the world, and sometimes when you compare this point of views and the attitudes of our students, that was I really like this diversity that we have among our students, and I just recommend them to continue what they do and stay with us. Just it's I think it's middle of the semester, and we have been great so far, and I think if you do what you're doing now, it would be great and for both of us. And I also wanted to say something. If we have time, there is also another question I think we forgot to talk about, the comparison between stereotyping and prejudice. And so one of you asked us to declare what is exactly the difference between stereotype and prejudice. So a stereotype is a belief or assumption about a certain group of people. So it could be positive or negative. An example of that could be like French are romantic, or all black people are good at basketball. Or a negative one could be people from group A are all terrorists, or people from group B carry disease. So stereotype is all about the thoughts we have about certain group of people. While prejudice is a feeling and emotion about a person based on their group membership. Prejudice could be hate, could be anger, could be disgust, or could be positive like trust or any other good feeling about a person because of their group membership. So what we should know is that different stereotypes cause different prejudices. Like when you think that a certain group of people carry disease, your feeling and your prejudice toward them will be discussed. While another example is when you think a certain group of people are terrorists, and that's the stereotype. So the prejudice caused by that stereotype is anger and hate and fear. The other thing I want to mention is the meaning of discrimination. Discrimination is an action, behavior that denies the rights of a person due to their membership in a group. So we should know that not every stereotype or prejudice comes to action in society, and if people act based on their prejudices, that's a discrimination, and we should be aware that when leaders of a society give hate speech, it might bring the hidden stereotypes and hidden prejudices in the society to their acts, and those become discrimination, and this is very dangerous. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, I want to add to what Farzana has said, just because I also teach this class in person on the one of the ASU campuses. And my class, when I teach Social 101 in person, there are 458 students to it. So I am sort of like on stage with a microphone, lecturing in a large lecture hall. But students have this same experience where they get the terms stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination confused. And I think Farzan explained the distinctions between them very, very well. A stereotype, for those of you who maybe are not quite yet clear on it, is a generalization that is made on the base about someone on the basis of their membership in some group, and it is typically not altogether accurate because it is based on just one attribute of the person. And as Farzaneh said, stereotypes can be positive or negative. And for those of you who, maybe some of you have made this connection already, but a stereotype is sort of like back in maybe the first week's reading, we talked about what is a status. It's a position that a member of a society can occupy in that society. But there is such a thing called a master status, which means one status that a person has so much significance for the members of society that they come to see the person as only that one thing. Right. And then they may make generalizations about the person just based on that one thing. And so a stereotype can be sort of a master status that can be either positive or negative. For example, in our country, the status of Olympic gold medal winner, that's a master status. And for those participants in the Olympics who didn't win gold medals, that also can be sort of a stereotype in the sense that once you know that about a person, you kind of cease to see all the other features of the person that make him or her an individual. You just see the person in terms of this one thing. But often in our society, when we think of stereotypes, we aren't thinking about positive stereotypes. We're thinking about the negative ones. And then to distinguish stereotype from prejudice is, as Farzaneh said, it's an emotion, it's an attitude that's based on, that comes from or is a function of having a certain stereotype of a person. And then discrimination is acting on that stereotype. Okay. I wanted to say again about the Yellow Dig posts. I want to encourage you to, along with your writing, to post photos, videos, or whatever as part of your post. The technology allows you to do that. And I know some of you have been doing that. And it just makes the experience of reading it all the more interesting for us, especially if the videos or the pictures are of you or of something in your life, some experiences you've had. It makes your words more powerful. And so I just wanted to encourage you to do that. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for today. I want to again thank you for tuning in, and I hope you'll be here for our next live chat session, which will be in another couple of weeks. Okay. So thank you and bye for now.